lot of people new at this don't even know what they don't know. There's questions that need to be asked. Why am I growing food? Is one. After you find out how many for how long, you say, okay, why am I growing food? Do I want to grow food to save money? Do I grow food for food security, for independence? Because I feel good in the garden? Is it a preparation, like, am I going to grow all of my own food in a survival situation? Am I doing it to can? Just because I want fresh food all season long, for a hobby, or because it's healthier? I grow organic food, or is it because it tastes better? Or preserve. Last question I have, just to be thought-provoking, is are you growing food to preserve fresh seed stock? And I mean, my answer is kind of a little bit of all those. Yes, I want to grow my own seed, and but to give you an example, why you want to know, because if you're growing food like you want to do canning, for me, I like getting 2 or 3 people together and doing a production. An example is, my mother lived with us on that 300 acres for a while. We grew all of our own food. We had 10,000 gallons of diesel for our generators to where we were off grid. We're prepared to be so for 2 years. 120 fruit trees, 2 milk cows. I mean, we were independent food-wise. Well, in our garden, we decided we were going to make some vegetable soup, and some of it we threw in some chicken or beef, but we did 60 gallons of it, 240 quarts. We had like 5 pressure cookers and spent 2 days and actually put up 240 quarts. So we grew everything that was in it. It was awesome. So it's when you're gardening to like put stuff up like that, it's good to have. In some cases, I even promote hybrids. I never promote GMO seed. I don't want GMO, but hybrids have their place. And so that's just one of the things, one of the reasons you need to actually articulate, document if you can, why am I doing this? But other questions I like to propose just to raise thoughts are, and we have that was prepared last minute, so forgive me, I'm having to look at it, make sure what it's saying. How much space do I have? How much do I need? Can I create more by building, digging, or do I need to move? What can I afford? What's a budget plan? What type of food do I eat? Because you need to grow what you eat. There's really no purpose other than maybe trading or whatever to do different. Will it grow where I live? You're talking about nothing grows around Austin. I bet, weeds. What does grow good around here? Yeah. So what do you do to prepare the dirt around here? How much? Yeah, okay. What about y'all? What about you? Okay. You till? You have raised beds, but you till? Do y'all till? Yeah, that's great. What do y'all till? Some? Yeah. Well, y'all been doing it as long as you have. You probably got your soil in real good shape. Do you know how to measure the health of your soil? You take, well, I believe in the square foot garden method. It's a good model. I don't necessarily mark every square foot. I just use raised beds. I believe in packing. I go to trouble to really improve my soil, so I really believe in getting the most production. And I look at it as a square foot. I mean, when I built my first garden in Arkansas, I went a little bit over the edge as far as accountability. I built 70, my whole garden space was 70 feet wide, 110 feet long. And in it, I had 70 little 4 foot by 5 foot gardens based on his model. And I had a walkway around each one, and all the outer ones, I had vertical frames in them so I could grow vertically. And on each square, though, I had them numbered by rows and letters, because here was my situation. I didn't go over this for those of y'all that wasn't here earlier. Reading that book, I was in Dallas. I was born and raised in Dallas. Had never gardened, I didn't know anything. And so when I read that book, touched something in my belly. I just felt like a sitting duck in the middle of 5 million people going nuts. I just saw that picture. I wasn't even saved then. I didn't know that the Lord had made me prophetic to where I'd see things. I realized in hindsight that's what it was, but I saw 5 million people going nuts, and I didn't like that picture. So I just, like a rabid animal, I went reading everything. I went to studying hard and heavy. And within, I think it was 3 months, we owned the first place in Arkansas was a house and 23 acres. And for 5 years, we every weekend drove back and forth from Dallas. On Friday night, we'd head to Arkansas, would work all day Saturday, half a day Sunday. And I had a guy, I'd usually have either 2 or 3 guys working with him on a weekend, and I had a guy that worked there during the week. And so the reason I numbered and lettered these squares, I would leave him a grid for exactly what I wanted harvested and planted during the week. So it would be there when I got back on the weekends. But it was, in hindsight, I can see I have a little tendency to be a control freak. And I've kind of relaxed a little since then. The Lord's done a lot of work in me since. I was saved in '96, and a lot of stuff changed then. But anyway, let me finish these questions that we asked. So, what type of food do I eat, grow what you eat, and will it grow where I live? What tools do I need to make this growing possible? Do I have this type of seed stored up? Will the items I like keep through the winter? Will I have enough calories to live with when I'm planning to grow? And can I grow feed for my animals? If not, can I store enough, long enough to suit my time frame? And on that question, before I forget, I don't have a note on this, so I'm going to tell you. When I first started out, I wanted to be able to grow animals, and through my reading and studies, I learned that rabbits are the most efficient animal on the planet. I mean, even more so than tilapia or whatever. For every 2 pounds you feed them, you're supposed to get a pound of meat back, which is just crazy efficient. So we built a 24 by 24 shed, I guess you would call it, put in suspended cages, a drip water system, and ended up with a bunch of rabbits. But then 6 months into it, well, I discovered that you can't keep the feed that you buy for them. It's alfalfa based, at least in Arkansas. Alfalfa based, and alfalfa does not, the nutrient value doesn't stay in it very long. My window that I had that I was planning for was 20 people for 2 years. That's what that garden, even though it was small by normal standard, with those 70 squares, maximizing on the output, I could feed 20 people for the fresh food part of the equation for a year out of it. So with the rabbits, I stopped growing them since I can only store food for 6 months. It just wouldn't fit. In hindsight, I can look back, and I should have been asking those questions up front. Okay. I want to go through some pictures. The last question I've written down is where? Do you want to stay where you are, or do you have to move to do what you need to do? Do you need to move to be in a safer location? Hit the next slide, please. This is a picture. When the Lord told us to move to Kansas City in 2004, we went from our utopian 300 acres to an 1,100 square foot apartment. It was kind of shock. And we went to an apartment because we didn't want to buy anything because we felt like we were there temporarily. As a mandate, I know that Grace and I, at some point, are going to end up in Israel. I thought the Lord meant that was going to happen sooner than later. So we spent 5.5 years in Kansas City living in this apartment, waiting, temporary. But kept signing short-term leases 6 months at a time, thinking, this is it. But it still has not come to be. So anyway, as you can see, we're in an apartment. You can't see the garden yet. We're going to have pictures of it, but that's one day's harvest out of 150 square feet. That's what you can do, like kind of using the square foot method. It basically says, you know, you feed the soil and the soil will feed you, and when you feed the soil well, you can plant really close together, and it works similar to hydroponics. Hydroponic roots are just this little bitty root ball. Because they don't need to spread out to get nutrient, it's all delivered to them through water. Well, when you have awesome, excellent soil, and you're careful to build it, and you get it to where it measures out as almost perfect, you can plant stuff 2 inches apart that normally they say plant a foot apart or better. So anyway, go to the next slide, please. This is a vertical frame. We lived in an upstairs apartment, so we have trellis down below us that's coming up one floor, and then we had vines and stuff you'll see later. This is when we first put our hog panels up, and you'll see in a minute we have plants that grew all the way up the roof. On our left, that little pot there that along the fence rail is full of strawberries. And along the left, all those plants along there, we had like 9 blueberry bushes and a pot of mint. Right there just on the walkway. We still had plenty there was enough room for me to roll by in my wheelchair, and those hanging buckets where we grew tomatoes upside down. And so it's total use of space. Go ahead to the next slide, please. This shows a little later, looking at it from the apartment. You can see the blueberries on the right. You can see we've got cucumbers, green beans. We've got cantaloupe growing vertically. Now that's something that I ran into one lady here that says she's been doing it for years, but that's first in all my years I saw anybody but me growing cantaloupe vertically. It's you ever tried that? Well, try it. A cantaloupe plant. This is one way I like to emphasize the value of thinking square foot gardening growing vertically. A cantaloupe normally in the garden takes about 120 to 150 square feet, meandering all over the place, and it grows a little vine, lightweight, that just the cantaloupe just snap off of it real easy. And with that as a mindset, you're going to think that thing won't hold a cantaloupe when it grows. How do you do that? But I'm telling you, out of experience, it's kind of a principle of God and a law of nature that faith costs you risk, and that for faith to work, you have to involve trust in God or whatever. But a vine, when you trust that sucker to grow strong enough to grow the plant, it does. And it don't do it until you point it up. It's kind of mind blowing, just the principle of it, but it reinforces faith lessons in the Bible. Anyway, so all right, you can see this. Go ahead. You can't tell by that picture that it's growing from 2 floors down, 1 floor down though. This is from a different angle. You can actually see how thick the growth is. Go ahead. Next slide. This is the view from outside. You could actually, we had a bunch of tomato plants growing and everything here. And keep in mind, that is all in 150 square feet. We had We make our own tomato cages out of concrete rebar to where they end up being about 6 feet tall. We use T-posts to stake them, and we had like 20 tomato plants in there. You can actually see some of the red there next to the right of the fence, the stairwells down at the bottom. But all that's growing about, I don't know, 18 to 20 feet up. And I mean, and that is cantaloupe, cucumbers, green beans. They'll actually grow a lot taller than that. They'll grow as tall as you make a frame to put them on. When we got this apartment, this little area wasn't landscaped very well, and so we asked if we could grow a garden. They kind of hesitated, but they said, yeah, okay. And it ended up, after about the middle of our first year doing this, that we started noticing people coming by all the time, and management and stuff being there. This is a huge complex, nearly 300 apartments. And they actually were bringing all their prospective tenants. I told the manager, she's Jewish, I'm part Jewish, and we understand, money, bottom line in our lives. And I told her I want to start getting a cut of their I want a commission. I mean, they brought every one of them. We had a steady flow of people going up and down those stairs looking at our garden. So, I mean, that's kind of unique in the apartment world. Go ahead. This is another picture of another day's harvest. You can see the diversity. I mean, it's, and in the middle of the summer, beets are supposed to be a cool weather crop. But I'm telling you, this was in like July or August, or the pole beans wouldn't have given up beans. And so I love the fact of being able to produce. Even got, there's carrots, cherry tomatoes, full-size tomatoes, 3 kinds of peppers, pole beans, and the cucumbers. I like those long slicing cucumbers like that. They're the kind of the oriental. Go ahead. Next slide. We moved recently. We finally said, no, forget waiting temporary here. We're just going to get some commitment going. And so we moved to the Brookside area of our town. It's kind of midtown, close to downtown, where the houses are like 80 years old and all. And we really had even less area there to build to garden than we did at the first place. But the Lord gave us our land out of the country, so we have kind of the best of both worlds. We live in a community where it's kind of like New York. We're like one house away from being at a shopping center where there's a grocery store and 15 restaurants, and I just step out the door and roll to go get a haircut every 2 weeks. And my wife loves it. She's wanted to live in New York City, and I think, So but then we have the place to go to an hour outside of Kansas City. But here, didn't have a place to grow cantaloupe, so I'm growing cantaloupe out of a pot, and they're growing up the rail of our back porch where I enter the house. Flip to the next one, please. This is a fence. It only gets 2.5 hours of direct sun a day, and people tell you things won't grow. Tomatoes need direct sun. Cucumbers need direct sun, all this. But I'm telling you, with a little over 2 hours a day, this grows. This is just this last year. And in between the fence and the garage, which is normally, most people consider dead space, we had mint, we had several herbs growing in there, we had spinach. Things that don't like a whole lot of sun grew in the middle of the summer because they weren't getting a whole lot. They were getting mainly shade. So you can always use a little bit of ground. Okay, next slide. This is a little 8-inch wide box. The gravel was already there, and so we moved the gravel, didn't undo the landscaping. I'm talking about against the garage, the back wall there. But we put in a 8-foot vertical frame. All we had was an 8-inch wide box, raised, it was just 6-foot boards, and put in some good compost and stuff there, and we grew a bunch of cucumbers and 4 tomato plants vertically, and in front of it we had a whole bunch of garlic that grew utilizing that same little 8-inch wide bed. It's 8 inches, 10 feet long. We had 6 cucumber plants, 4 tomatoes, and those tomatoes ended up growing way up onto the roof of the house. And I don't know, 10 or 12 garlic. Go ahead. Yeah, okay. See it? That's it? Okay. Well, that little logo there, it's just a little thing to say that we're having our own 2-day conference in August 5th and 6th in Kansas City. I don't know if any of y'all would want to make it, but we really, what you've learned here from some of our team, Rod and Glenna Kellen are part of that. We really go into some real detail that I think can really equip you to a little more detail than here. And as a byproduct of that, we had our first, it was a 3-day conference in March 18th through 20th, and we have some CDs downstairs that are a byproduct of that. So, all right, I just wanted to show those pictures, not to tout our horn or anything, but just for those of you that don't have space, you don't have to go buy a farm to be able to do some of this. I mean, you can do it out of pots if you have the attitude of wanting to, I like to, the other day at a conference last weekend, a guy and his 3 brothers that I know comes up to me, and I tell him that I use those IBC containers to store fuel, and he starts asking me, well, what about emissions? What about legal? What about? And and he's an engineer, so he's real meticulous. But I just told him, Don, you're trying to think of 10 reasons why not to do something. I try to find the one reason why to do it and get after it. I believe from a business standpoint, from being an entrepreneur, that, and by the way, I think I boiled down the entrepreneurial mindset to say that I believe with the gifts God's given me and His help, I can achieve anything in any environment. And I think that's what the times we're going into, kind of the mindset we have to put on. But I believe there's a book by Michael Masterson, a writer. He's a secular business writer, but the title of his book is Ready, Fire, Aim. And he just lays forth very articulately the premise that the guy that puts action to work, even though he might make a few mistakes, but he figures it out on the way, will always end ahead of the person that has to figure it all out and get it all on a spreadsheet and have all the answers before he takes the first step. So I really encourage you to be at the place of action. But next, I'm just going to cover a few garden basics. I think these are things that I apply that I've learned over years. You feed the soil feeds you. I believe you should, in using raised beds or garden, that you should add 3 to 6 inches of organic matter, compost, manure per year to the whole thing. That's a whole lot more appropriate with raised beds because you don't walk on it, you don't compact it. In my mind, I think you should never till. The biggest friend you have in the garden is the earthworm, and when you till, you chop them in pieces. Now, how you measure your soil, perfect soil, or when it's close to perfect, you can take the top 6 inches of a square foot and count 50 earthworms. 50 earthworms in the top 6 inches of a square foot of soil. I believe Square Foot Gardening Guide says that too. I think that's where I got it, matter of fact. But generally it takes, for a beginner, it takes about 3 years minimum to get your soil there. But where you go, how you get there is adding organic matter, compost, manure, are the primary sources of that. Doesn't matter if it's cow, rabbit, goat, horse, or whatever. If you're going to grow in the soil, you need to dilute horse or cow manure because it's what they call too hot. It's got a little too much nutrient in it from the get-go. Goat and rabbit and sheep manure is the very best. I mean, you can put it in your soil and grow in it immediately. That's another reason why we raise rabbit. But the bottom line on it was my window that I was built, the window I looked through was to be prepared to take care of 20 people for 2 years. Because the feed for the rabbits would only store for 6 months, it was impossible for that to be a 2-year strategy for me. It just wasn't viable. Absolutely. I lived in my environment where I was, it was primarily pine forest that the house had a little bit of area built for the house, and the garden area and all that, it just growing alfalfa wasn't part of the equation. It was done. The closest alfalfa was Kansas, which was 5 hours away from where I lived, and in a bad situation, it just wasn't viable. So I've learned something since then as far as ingredients go, and I could have had some protein equivalents several different ways, but then I was a novice. But I still had formed the criteria by the second year of storage. I told the story earlier, I don't know if y'all were in there, about just becoming a hoarding mess, because the very first year I started, I made pretty good money, so I wasn't stocked by money. I buy things at deep discounts, nearly everything I buy. The Lord's gifted me it. I call it rooting. I root things out. I'm able to find the bottom line places like these canned goods I mentioned. But it's kind of like that with everything. And I built a network of relationships and actually made a good living for the last 10 years doing it. And so I did it with that. Anyway, so I shifted my attention to other animals and to protein I could store and alternative ways of doing it. We canned and anyway, what I ended up developing was 3 to 6 inches of organic matter in our garden. Actually, in the Square Foot Gardening book, he actually gives a formula for building the perfect soil. So when I built that garden with the 70 squares, I had a backhoe dig out all the dirt and actually brought in ingredients that made my soil and made the beds. The soil was so soft we could stick our elbow in it. I mean, we could stick our hand and it'd go up to the elbow. It was, I mean, we started with compost, peat moss, builder sand, what else? Well, yeah, no, that was part of our fertilizer we make. Vermiculite, perlite, and we put it all in there just to keep the soil valuable, but where it would hold a lot of water. It was awesome soil, and then we built it even better over the 3 years that we had that place 4 years before we moved. But all right. Garden basics. Okay, you add the organic matter. It's best not to walk on your soil. That way you never compact it. You keep the oxygen oil in, the oxygen from the earthworms in it. And like I said, you don't want to till it. You kill all the benefits. I don't know if y'all know about nematodes you can actually add great organisms. There's actually, I learned early on that there's actually insectaries that you don't have to use. Pesticides and things. You can, for instance, to get rid of some bugs, you just put cayenne on your plants. You have to reapply it when it rains, but I mean, you can get a big thing of cayenne at the store at Costco for $3.50. So that's not expensive, but it's healthy. That works with to some extent with deer and rabbit as well. I don't propose that you put chickens in the garden. Some people do, but they'll pluck on your fruit and stuff. I found guineas to be a whole lot better. They're made to eat insects, and guinea fowl are really, besides, they're just a blast to watch. Have y'all ever had guineas? Oh, we just love them. My wife did. They'll fight and peck each other, but yet they're kind of like a schooling animal, and they go just like a school of fish, like without communicating, and they're just a hoot to watch. And ducks. We haven't had ducks in our garden, but I talked to some people that talked about how they leave they leave the actual plants alone, but they eat all the bugs out of the garden. So that was a rabbit trail. Excuse me. It's you want to set your garden or your food supply, your farm or whatever. You want to put it close to your house, so you'll utilize it a lot better. Heirloom seeds are best. GMO seeds are to be avoided. Hybrid seeds can be a very strategic tool, which I'll get into in a few minutes. Simple, good tools are a joy. Spend what you need to get them. Ones that come highly recommended, because in the right situation, you don't want them breaking on you. You want them easy to use. Yeah. I'm going to give you a handout that's seeds in a minute, but heirloom seeds, ones that are open pollinated, so you can get seed from them, they're best to build your seed storage on that. GMO seeds are to be avoided. They're genetically altered. GMO, genetically modified organism, is what that stands for. And I don't know if you know much about that, but it's like Monsanto actually takes genetics from a bug and puts them in a plant to make it do some of the stuff they want it to do. And that's exactly, some of that stuff is what's going to build a blight. They're actually bred and built and crafted to be disease resistant. Or, I don't know if any of y'all are farmers. I mean, if you're farmers, you know that the most productive plants are GMO, and just to actually make a living in today's environment, you almost have to use them. They're bred to grow closer together. They're bred to be drought tolerant, but mostly disease tolerant. But forgive me if you're a farmer, anything that's built to withstand putting Roundup, one of the most powerful defoliants ever created, and survive and live, why are we putting that in our bodies? Or even putting the meat that was fed on that in our bodies? It's just, I think our bodies are, it's like trying to put a round peg in a square hole. It's not going to fit. And there has to be a cost somewhere, and I think we're starting to see that in more prevalent disease in our society. I believe it can be traced back to that and some of the other things that man's altered, like white flour, white sugar, and things like that. That's a whole nother ballgame story, excuse me. place where you can get your what? Deer. I hadn't even thought of that. I don't eat much of it. But that's a good question. Well, that's true, depending on where you get them. I mean, you can go hunting in pine forest or somewhere like that. I mean, I never thought that one through. Wow. I know as far as chickens, you can raise your own or you can get free-range chickens. You pay a premium for it. I know you can get grass-fed beef. It's people that believe in it. It costs more because I think it takes like 1.5 times longer to grow a steer that even comes close to the same weight. A year and a half ago or so, I bought 12 and had them butchered all at the same time. Grass-fed beef and some grass-fed lamb. Lamb's really inexpensive. You buy a lamb and have it butchered, it gives you about 25 pounds of meat, but you can buy them for $100. Seriously. I mean, there's a number of places. Where we are in Kansas City, there's a place about an hour south. There's another one about 2 hours north. And I generally do 4 or 5 of them at once just to get a decent amount of meat. But so you're saying radiation is in the grass? Where's the radiation on the grass coming from? Where do you live? Wow, I haven't heard about that. I thought there wasn't, I hadn't heard of any ramifications in our country having to do with Hiroshima. I know if there's radiation there and it's airborne, it has to go somewhere, but I hadn't heard about that. I'm in Kansas City, Missouri, and our place in the country's in, it's actually in Kansas on the far eastern side, and it hadn't been an issue. I don't know what you can do about radiation falling on grass other than get your food from somewhere else. I mean, it's not like you can go grass underground. As I'll show you something here in a little bit, you can grow food underground. We're actually in process of actually arranging that. Okay, I'm going to go down my notes and then we can do a lot of question and answer here in a minute. But one of the things I want to point out, most people think of compost and manure going on in your garden. I don't know if you know this, but there is more nitrogen in urine than there is in the actual manure of an animal. And just out of curiosity, being a quadriplegic, paralysis, I have like a bag on my leg for urine. I don't want to get gross or graphic, and it has to be emptied. So I've actually emptied it on grass, and within a day and a half, you can go back and light green grass turns dark green because it's immediate nitrogen fertilizer out of our urine. And so I got a note that says, pee on your garden. But it's actually, I got that by reading a book on an ancient culture that is still alive now in the Himalayas, where people normally, their average life is 115 years. So you got to think they're doing something right. And they go to great lengths to save everything and to utilize everything because they're way up in the mountains, and it takes tremendous trouble for them to bring anything in. But so they're very, very, very efficient. I love efficiency when you start thinking about times we're going to be going into, and they go to great length to capture the cow and goat urine that they use. You need to feed your soil a lot of trace minerals. My favorite way to do it is through lava sand. It takes very little lava sand. You can use 2 to 3 pounds per 1,000 square feet, and it acts like a time release. It's like it works for up to 10 years. I like to do it every 2 or 3 years just because it doesn't cost much, and all the trace minerals. There's 50 to 60 trace minerals that actually give your food a lot of its flavor. That's why an organic garden, an organic tomato tastes so much better than a mass-produced one, or one you grow at home tastes so much better. It's because it's getting trace minerals that it needs. And I mean, it's like that in a lot of gardens. I mean, in a lot of foods. But lava sand, green sand, rock phosphate, and another way to do it is where we lived, we utilized our wood ash in the garden. Your wood ash acts as lime. It raises the pH of acidic soil. If your pH needs to be raised, you can utilize wood ash. I actually used wood ash as part of my formula in our own fertilizer. Another way that we fertilize that most people don't think about, we use sprays. You can take a tablespoon of molasses, dark molasses. You can take 2 tablespoons of apple cider vinegar per gallon of water, put it in a backpack sprayer, and spray it on the underside of the leaves. That's where and you can see immediate results within 12 hours. It's like in a human putting vitamins in a vein. I mean, it's immediate. It's so much faster and goes. It's like going straight to the system. The formula, or what I was doing. A tablespoon of molasses and 2 tablespoons of apple cider vinegar per gallon of water in a sprayer. Apple cider. Per gallon, yes. It'll work good. It'll give a certain shot to under the leaves. Yeah, the top side is, it's sun. Generally, you'll have the shiny layer on the top and the dull layer on the bottom and a bunch of plants. The bottom part is like porous. It's kind of like our skin. It just sucks up stuff. I didn't believe it when I first read it years and years ago, but it worked. And on just footnote on beneficial insects, we got something called I don't know if you've ever had an aphid infestation, the little white bugs on tomatoes or stuff. Well, we had our garden, and our first garden, we had beds strode out over a 4-acre area. And you're supposed to get so many of these little eggs on a little card per given area. So I bought enough for 5 acres. And any of y'all ever heard of a trichogramma wasp? Have you used them? Well, they lay their eggs. They're a little wasp that you don't even see. It's kind of like a gnat. And when you buy them, you get this card. They're little break-off cards the size of a postage stamp. And you get a card about like it's about the size of an index card. And supposedly it's got so many million wasp eggs. Well, you place them out. You never see anything. But 2 weeks later, keeping in mind, I go to my place every weekend. 2 weeks later, I come, and we can't find an aphid. We had millions of them infested. And I came to find out I bought enough trichogramma wasps to handle 50 acres, not just 7. So I probably killed every aphid in the whole region. But my point being, they are really effective on a whole lot of insects. What's the name of that place? Is it MD Durango or MR Durango? M&R Durango. It's Durango, Colorado is where they're out of. But they have a website and everything. They actually list bugs you can get rid of. They didn't have anything to get rid of a squash bug, though. Oh, I hate them. Let me give you a tip. When talking about squash bugs, I say in all your stored food, I don't know if y'all have heard me say that you freeze it at 0 degrees for 10 days and it kills all the bug eggs in it. Well, you need to do that with your garden seed as well. That way you get rid of the eggs for squash bugs that are already there. They don't have a leg up on you. A lot of people wonder, you can plant squash. Like when I moved to this house, this last house, this garden, there hadn't been a garden there ever. We got there late in the season, so I went and bought some plants and put them in. I mean, before those plants were 3 weeks old, before they even started flowering, we had squash bugs on them. And that is just evidence that the eggs are there at the point of the seed. And so freeze them, freeze your seed. Long-term storage of seed, it's best to keep them in the freezer because it suspends the life of them. They stay viable. Seed normally will only stay viable 2 or 3 years, but in the freezer, it suspends the life of it. And so I'm a big advocate of that. But it's just smart to do it even if you're using it this year because you kill the bug eggs. At least fresh bugs got to find it. It's not the ones from the last generation. Yeah, and the key is the bigger your garden is, the more organic matter you're going to have to use on it. So find a source for organic matter. Where we were in Arkansas, there was some Arabian horse farms close by, and they had piles. I mean, it looked like a couple of acres, 10 feet thick, full of manure. And so they welcome getting it hauled off. I'm just giving you ideas for organic. You don't have to go buy your organic matter. And so we paid a dump truck fee, and we just moved a couple of dump truck loads of it. Or we went to another small stable, and we had 55-gallon barrels that we took, a horse stable, and we'd change them out once a week. They'd fill them up. They'd fill up 10 of them, and we'd get them and haul them and take them 10 new ones. And so we did that with some places that raise rabbits. They all have to get rid of manure. And so it was just another example of thinking. It's part of the fruit of the prayer that I try to pray every day is, Lord, redeem my mind. Don't let me be limited in my thoughts by the life I've lived previously. And so it's just creative ideas. The byproduct of working hard at creating good soil is you're able to grow the plants much closer, as I said before. I'd say growing vertically is key. We recently, in the last year, the Lord, I had a dream of raised beds that were 30 inches high and how they were so much more user-friendly. I figured it'd take more soil to fill them at first, take a little more wood to build them, but once they're built, they last for years. It was be totally user-friendly. I know most people that work for me, or most people that have gardens, they have to bend over, especially as you get older, you get less user-friendly. And you just can't handle the physical aspect of gardening. But if you have a pitcher bed 30 inches high or about an inch or two lower than your kitchen counter, I believe most counters are 31 inches, that it just changes the game. Not only do the weed seeds not blow in because they travel along the ground, rabbits can't get to it, pests can't get to it. you're just going to use it a lot more. And so you multiply your harvest. You put that together with a greenhouse, starting your plants. Well, part of our strategy when we had those 70 little beds, and now we're able to get between 3 and 4 crops per year out of our topsoil. We don't use our soil as a start to finish planting seed. We do that in a greenhouse, and so we just use our prime soil as a finishing place. We do the first, in most plants, we do the first 4 to 8 weeks from seed in a greenhouse, putting them for anywhere from the last month to 2 months in our garden, with the exceptions of perennials. We have a book downstairs too that I want to kind of create a little bit of thought. It's called 101 Perennial Vegetables. It is possible, if you look it up, to build what I call a forest garden. A forest garden is a new kind of concept that if you look it up on YouTube, you'll get a whole lot of videos. I think the leader that I like watching the most, that has it down the most, is a guy named Geoff Lawton. It's Geoff and then Lawton, Geoff Lawton. He's a guy from Australia, but he's really, really taking it to a new level. And when I saw what he's doing, it automatically, I had thought of the Garden of Eden. How Adam walked in the garden, they didn't have to work for food. It wasn't until after Adam sinned and the fall came that the Lord said, by the sweat of your brow and the tilling of the soil, you will eat your food. And I believe that's when grain became more of a part of our diet, that I believe he walked in the garden, that vegetables were perennials. They didn't have to be planted every year. But as Geoff Lawton shows you, it's relevant now. If you seek to have a forest garden, then you can. He has principles that says in a garden, when you get like a grasshopper infestation, he doesn't call it a grasshopper infestation, he calls it a turkey shortage. Seriously, that's his attitude to come to it. He looks at the balance of nature and what you can do to operate with it, not against it. You don't need a bunch of poison. You need a few turkeys. He said if you have a slug infestation, then it's just a duck shortage. Get a few duck. Anyway, the forest gardening is a whole new concept. It's one that I'm moving forward in. Number one, everybody can walk in that, and they won't even know where the food is. They won't even know how to steal your food or how to fight you for it. They don't even know you have it. It just looked like an overgrown patch of land you had. What really blew me away is when you start down the trail of looking on YouTube, you'll come to the I think it was 600-year-old forest garden, and it takes you to Korea, where there is a 2-acre place, and Jeff goes there and he starts talking to these little bitty Korean people, and he asked them, how long has this been here? And what blew me away, these people said this 2 acres has been feeding our family for 26 generations. The plant diversity in there, it was like 500 different plants. Everything had its purpose and reason. Even in a hollow log, there was a beehive where they got honey. I mean, it was amazing. And if you looked at it, you'd just think it's an overgrown patch of junk. But as this book we have downstairs, it'll challenge your mind. It'll cost you $35, but I say it's worth the read and the resource, because who knew there are 101 plants, vegetable plants, that you can grow, and you never have to plant them again. They just grow, and it matures. And Jeff teaches there's 7 layers of vegetation. You have your canopy trees, but if you plant them purposefully, you can plant what they call legume trees that grow 50 feet tall, but they fix nitrogen in the soil that the other layers feed off of. There's fruit trees that are the second tier. Then you have bushes that are the third tier. Then you have crops like not asparagus, like okra that grow up underneath that. And if you let some of the pods fall on the ground, that's the seed for the next year. That's not even one of the perennials. That's just part of the concept of life and death, that if you leave the forest to its ultimate design, that you don't have to live. I believe Adam and Eve walked in the forest and ate the fruits thereof. There was no tilling, or why would it be in the Bible, by the sweat of your brow and the tilling of the soil, you'll live off the land. I mean, I think that is to tell us to look backwards and see they didn't have to sweat before that. They walked in fellowship with the Lord in the forest. Revelation is, at its core, is the writing of the restoration of all things. To know what that is, you have to truly study Genesis to see what was that's going to be restored. So I believe when I saw forest gardening, it just, bam, and all that came together for me, and I recognized that was what was in the process of what's going to be. So when Jesus told me that's what I was going to be teaching, I knew I'm taking process, and what I believe when he comes back and restores and builds his kingdom, I believe the earth is going back to forestation in the place of food forest. So keep all that in the back of your mind when you're watching some of the videos. And I challenge you to even consider doing a little bit of your land that way. Forest gardening. Yes. Excuse me? Yeah, awesome. Hey, go in there, forest gardening, and look, get that 300, 600, or however many years. It would have something to do with Jeff Lawton, I believe. He's the one that does the interview, but let me know when you find it. You got it? Oh, I didn't even think about that. That video is only like 3 or 4 minutes, so we have the time to look at it. While we're talking about that, there's another concept. Since he can show you videos, it's only about 1.5 minutes long. Write this website down, omegagardens.com. There's a method of growing food in 1/4 to 1/3 of the time to maturity underground without sunlight. There are these systems. You can get the home version that in one little place about the size of those 2 chairs, you can grow 80 plants hydroponically. It's in a barrel that turns. There's no pumps involved. There's just a pool of soil that turns at a pace where each plant is dipped in nutrient once every hour and 15 minutes. It circles, and it's circling around a grow light in the middle. And because the plant is constantly struggling against gravity to go towards the light, it accelerates the growth at a cell level and speeds up growth to where an example they use is romaine lettuce. That normally it matures in 60 days, matures in 16. Okay, well, picture that. That's the home version. They have a prototype for a commercial version that's 21 feet tall with 6 barrels. Each barrel holds 500 plants. So in 150 square feet, you grow 3,000 plants that mature in 16 days. And only 150 square feet. Now, I don't know if any of y'all have heard me talking about the caves where we are, 58 degrees constant. It has 1 million square feet that's already been mined out that is undeveloped land, undeveloped, that prior to us coming along hasn't been used for anything. We have 1 million square feet we could turn into an underground farm that's growing 3,000 plants every 150 square feet. Do the math. Without sunlight. And then let me add one thing to it. There's a guy that we know that is the leading tilapia fingerling seller in the nation. He's got a PhD in whatever you call that skill. Oh, I'm not a linguist for sure. Anyway, and when he was 16 years old, the Lord gave him he calls it an algorithm. I call it a formula. They ended up patenting. He is the only one in the United States that can grow hydroponically certified organic. All hydroponics is founded on chemicals. His algorithm that he patented allows him to alter the feed going in a fish to affect the desired nutrient coming out the fish to grow the plant that he is wanting to grow. So what we're doing, we're coupling him with the carousel concept from Omega Gardens to create an underground both tilapia farm, aquaponics on steroids. I mean, it's crazy. You been able to find it, Chris? Ooh, okay, you haven't downloaded it? All right, well, can you do two things at once? Because the next one is going to be the Omega Gardens Carousel. There's several versions of it in there. I believe they have like a minute 56-second version that would have a really good picture of the carousel that I'm wanting to show. I hadn't dreamed I'd actually be able to show you all this stuff. Isn't technology great? Yeah.
What is the power draw on the grow light? I mean, is that a significant?
Yeah, it's significant, but it's minimized if we start, it's like the people that I'm working with, they're starting to try to use LED grow lights, because with LED, you can choose what light spectrums you utilize. And so the harmful ones, you weed out and don't waste energy on it, and you just produce the ones the plant needs, and you cut your...
24-hour rotation, dark light.
Yeah, you don't do 24-hour growing. You do 14 to 16, and so you don't, yeah. That's why you find, I don't know if you're in the main session where I was talking about natural gas and other alternative energy. I think the Lord has places for us. If we have eyes to see and a willingness to look, that we can find alternative energy. Were y'all in the main session? Have you been in any other previous sessions? Well, last year, July of last year, the Lord has given me a vision. I call it Goshen Properties, to develop 9 square mile area communities, which is 5,760 acres, consisting of 20 families with 30 acres each, that are believing God to team up in unity and become supernaturally efficient and productive areas that feed cities of refuge and keep markets open to Israel. So we're in our first one. He gave me the vision March 13th of 05 and had me sit on it for 6 years. For a guy that talks as much as I do, that was painful. But he had me share it publicly March 20th, the last day of our first seminar. And we're actually walking it out now, but in July or August of last year, I got an email from somebody in Egypt telling me about a piece of land an hour from Kansas City. I went to check it out. This place had a 4,500 square foot house with 7 bedrooms. It had a 4-acre lake 30 feet deep for a water supply, and the house was supplied by its own natural gas well straight out of the ground from God. And come to find out, the whole region around it, all the neighbors, farmers, neighbors, they're already utilizing it and have been for 50 years. So the whole region has it. And so we've been buying some of the land, trusting God. He said that this was our first seed land to start actually walking out and building the communities. For $3,000 an acre, we're able to sell the land with mineral rights and energy. And come to find out, there's pockets all over the place like that. You just have to be looking for it. I mean, I found in Raytown, right in the middle of the Kansas City area, suburb of Kansas City, that there was a house. There were 6 houses that a man built in 1980, 2 acres each. Each had its own gas well, right in the middle of the city. I mean, and I challenge you to say that if you look for it, you can find it nearly anywhere. And energy like that's a game changer. For me, seed strategy is a real important thing to teach, and so I want to share a few minutes with that before we have to go. I think it's just as important in where we're heading, and just as important as actually growing the food. Have y'all already been given your printouts? I don't have a copy of it, but I'll just tell you this. I'm not going to actually, there's no bullet points or anything else. I just wanted to share it with you. That's a lot of work over time. It's about 300 seeds, but it's a valuable list that I want you to use as a resource, not as a model, because nobody's going to want to do the same thing that I do, and I call them on shots. But there is a column there that says days to maturity. That's important to me because the shorter I can grow, time to grow food, the more important. You will notice in there in the column that says hybrid open pollinated, or what OP stands for open pollinated. The HY stands for hybrid. One thing I want to stress is when you look at seed as a hybrid, not as a belief statement, things change for you. I believe hybrids are valuable for their place. I have a bag, and to prove my point, the highest, Grace, come here a minute, please. I want you to pass this bag of seed around. Hold it up for just a minute. This bag, I'm using as an example, is a strategic tool for me. It's 5 pounds of turnip seed, but it's a hybrid. It's called 7-Top. It is a seed that doesn't grow a turnip. It just grows the greens. Because it doesn't grow a turnip, it never really knows when it's finished. A normal turnip, once it grows its turnip and the turnip gets big, the turnip will oversize, get hard, crack on you, and then it bolts to seed because it thinks it's done. With this, as long as weather or sun or whatever is, just pass it around. I want you to just see it. So it's the right tool for strategic. We don't have 15 more minutes. Excuse me? Oh, wow, I didn't know that. All right, so y'all have to learn some of this on. Okay, my point with this is a packet of seeds cost $2.25. You get 125 seeds. When you think about strategic planning, you buy this seed by the pound, and there's 190,000 seeds in a pound. This bag right here costs $25 for 5 pounds. That's 960,000 seeds. And so by design, I can take half a pound, that's $2.50 worth of this, plant it in a quarter of an acre, set aside for 150 chickens, and feed 150 chickens all winter long on the green growth with just a little bit of oyster shell calcium supplement. That is just the beginning of the seed strategy. I was hoping to share more with you, but we have to go. One other thing is we're shutting down. Just a bush bean traditionally matures in 60 days, open pollinated. You can get hybrids that do the same thing in 42 days. First thing in the spring, if you've been eating beans and rice all winter, that 2.5 weeks is huge as far as being able to get fresh produce. Those are the ideas I want to open your mind up as far as strategy goes. Take a look at hybrids. Use them strategically, not as your foundation, and go from there. And just know that a hybrid will produce seed. it just not be exactly like the plant that you raised. It might be one of 20 generations before it. A hybrid is only a standardized plant that has been standardized through 20 to 30 generations, and in the right lab can be reverse engineered back to the diversity it came from. So it's not an evil thing like the other ones. OP's open pollinated. It is a heirloom seed. That's what you want to build your foundation on. Anyway, y'all have my contact information. Email me if you want to know more. I can send you stuff. You can go to the website. There's not a lot there yet on this subject, but I'm going to do teachings on it that you can get through our website or whatever.